Once upon a time, in a small kingdom of tiny cottages, babbling brooks, and rolling hills, lived a little witch. A middle-sized wolf, an absolutely enormous giant. His awesome footsteps echoed like thunder throughout the land. How will the prince pull a strand of hair from the giant's head? Find out in this story of wolves, witches, and giants called The Giant with the Golden Hair. Once upon a time, there was a king who had a beautiful daughter. He was very selfish and refused to let anyone marry her. In particular, a young prince who pestered him day and night. He thought of a way of ridding himself of the irritating prince once and for all. You may marry my daughter, provided you bring me a golden strand of hair pulled from the head of the giant. Now, the giant was extremely fierce, especially when his hair was pulled or any other part of him. So the king was sure he would never see the lad again. The prince did not know the way to the giant's cave, so setting off, called at the gate of a walled city. Halt! Ugaza! Barked the corporal on the gate. Can you tell me where to find the giant with his golden hair? Only if you tell me how comes we get no water out of the fountain. That's probably because there's a toad blocking the supply pipe, said the prince hopefully. Ha ha ha! We shall see, Sonny Jim. And sure enough, it turned out that the prince was correct, and the corporal was forced to eat his words and the toad. Delicious. If you take that road there, eventually you'll come to a lake, which you will have to cross to reach the giant's cave. Now then, on your way. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. The prince hurried along, and after many adventures, found himself at the edge of a great lake. The only way to see the giant is across the lake. The only way to cross the lake is by ferry, and the only ferryman is me. The voice came from an old boatman with a huge walrus moustache and a walrus. Could you row me across, please? I'll row you over if you answer me one question, and that is, why am I doomed to row back and forth across the lake till the end of time? The answer is that you are doomed to row back and forth because you never let anybody else row for you. Hand the oars to the next person who asks you, and he will row for the rest of his days. The ferryman was grateful for this simple but stupid solution, which he wished he had thought of 40 years ago. And at a snail's pace, he rowed the prince across the lake. Wait here for me. It won't take long. No, I don't suppose it will. There, before the prince, stood the entrance to the cave, and from far below the echoey noise of snoring. The rocks rattled as the gigantic snores reverberated up from the depth. The prince picked his way silently through the maze of tunnels carved out of the mountain. Suddenly, the prince stood at the entrance to a huge chamber, and there, in the middle, in his pajamas, lay the sleeping giant. The prince remembered the king's word to pull out a strand of hair and return it to him at the palace. So, bracing himself, he gave an enormous tug on a strand of hair and ran for all he was worth.
Hello! Who has been pulling my precious golden hair?
The prince did not wait to give him an answer as he ran out of the vast chamber with the giant in hot pursuit.
Fee, fi, bo, bum. I smell the underwear of an Englishman,
Roared the giant as he thundered down the corridors after the prince. Suddenly, the prince emerged from the cave and, clutching his precious strand of hair, dashed down the hill towards the edge of the lake, with the giant closing on him every stride. Seeing the old ferryman was still waiting, but remembering how slowly he had rowed him across, the athletic young prince dived in the water and started to swim for safety for all he was worth, which was £3.10. The giant thundered up to the ferryman.
follow that prince.
I ain't licensed for giants. Besides, you're too heavy, governor. We'll sink.
Oh, no, we won't. Here, give me those oars. I will row.
With the greatest of pleasure, said the ferryman, hopping out of the boat. And the giant rowed into the sunset, out of the sunset, and is still rowing to this day. Meanwhile, the prince had swum to the other side and back to the palace with his precious strand of hair. The king reluctantly agreed that the young prince had earned his bride, and you shall be married the very next day and live happily ever after. Thank heavens she's off my hands.
Small animals in cans.